It's the year 2007, the final year of 3rd edition D&D, and the introduction of 4th edition is just months away. You pop into your local big chain bookshop and you go to the game section and see all the 3rd edition supplements and modules and think, well, they won't work with the new rules coming next year. Is there anything else I can buy? So you take a look around and there's this weird vampire game that looks like a headstone and you think it looks super edgy. There's something about squid gods and fish people that looks weird but really complicated. And there's this game that your big brother told you about. It's called Burps or something, but this is called GURPS. What the hell is that?
What the hell is even that?
So since you're not interested at this point, pop over to the video game shop and check out this World of Warcraft thing people have been talking about. And you don't realize it now, but in just a few short months, your tabletop gaming hobby is going to split. Your friend group might also fracture, and the world itself is going to change. And let's be honest, you might not even bother playing tabletop games anymore. So you should buy old games. And I don't mean like buy 2014 edition D&D books. I mean log on to something online, bidding site maybe, or go to a local secondhand or thrift shop and challenge yourself to find tabletop games that you've never heard of, that were released in a year that starts with 19... or 20... and see if you can grab them. Me telling you not a good enough reason? Okay, here we go. Reason 1, censorship. You have probably seen this article floating about online on some social media site. This is Marion Stokes. She used physical media to track and ensure that every American news broadcast from 1979 until she died in 2012 was recorded. In case anyone decided to alter the past, she had a record of it. And you might think stuff like that never happens in tabletop games. This is quite a special book. This is special not only because it has the lovely limited alternate cover, that art done by Elena Richards, but this has a secret teeny tiny detail in it that a lot of people want you to forget, namely pages 145 and 147. Ilya Shkipin, who was commissioned to create illustrations for this book, instead
Allegedly
chose to use AI generated images and touch up some bits, then called it a day.
Allegedly.
This is relevant because in the digital copy of this, available on D&D Beyond, these images do not exist. Any which way you chop that up, that's a form of censorship. And in fairness to Wizards of the Coast, they have made it clear and obvious they have done this. Hi, Editing Milkman here. Okay, so since their recent webpage update there a couple months ago, they've actually removed the flag that would notify you that there was basically art removed from this. Yeah, this is just straight up censorship now, technically. However, bad actors are out there who could do this on a whim and set the entire industry back. Enter Visa and MasterCard. I use Bixby's as an example as it was the most public at the time, but insultingly, this next example has kind of been brushed off. In July of 2025, a Christian Puritan conservative group, which is always a great bunch of people, they pressured Visa and MasterCard to ban purchasing of adult games. I use the air quotes because it wasn't just that games that were created and meant exclusively for adults that were effective. No, it was games that this Christian group considered adult. And we all know how much they love to demonize gender identity, non-conventional people, and self-expression, so they feel these are also adult topics. So what happened? Well, itch.io tanked the majority of their indie creators, delisting their games, so it wasn't just a case of you can't find the game in their shop anymore. No, it removed them whether people had purchased them already or not. This was quickly reverted because imagine trying to explain to the hundreds of thousands of users that the game they paid money for isn't there to play anymore. Those games, however, still do not appear in the search function, though they are technically listed on the itch.io site. All this is bonkers because a lot of indie TTRPG creators have been using itch for years without issue. Valve, who on Steam went through a similar hiccup, but have gone back on a lot even though their system now requires credit card details in order to view or access mature content. Reason 2, media preservation. My favourite racing game of the 2000s was Need for Speed Most Wanted. Stay with me here. This is a game that, despite its piss filter and janky driving issues, cemented my love of both cars and the Need for Speed games as a franchise. Not that anyone asked, but I have written a story for a Need for Speed game that would essentially be a string to tie all the best games together and finally explain how we came to own that M3 GTR. back to my point. This game is becoming difficult to get hold of. Right now, it's not really expensive, it's just that I don't have the money to throw 60 euros at a game that I really enjoyed as a kid. These games are getting rarer, and they are getting harder to get hold of because the publishers do not offer any modern way to get hold of them, making every physical copy essentially an archive piece. Now, I want to give a more relatable example because looking at my audience statistics, something more fantasy or like sci-fi might hit harder. Oh, this? Yes, I'm doing this transition again. In the original release of Mass Effect 1, there was so much dialogue and world building centered around masking hard drive loading times. Elevators. It was when you use the elevators.
You ever miss those talks we had on the elevators?
No.
Come on, remember how we'd all ask you about life on the flotilla? It was an opportunity to share.
This conversation is over.
Tell me again about your immune system.
I have a shotgun.
Maybe we'll talk later.
To mask the fact that the game was loading a new area from the hard drive, there were teammate dialogue tracks that would play in the elevators. Pretty clever, good way to mask it. Passes the time and gives you some interesting info. Fast forward to Mass Effect Legendary Edition's release, and the load times were cut down to less than 20 seconds on average due to modern hardware. Meaning people are missing out on in-jokes, lore, proper relationship building scripts, and also some pretty weird newsreels. These tracks are still in the Legendary Edition, but the odds that you will ever hear them because of load times have been improved that much, and are also now technically optional and skippable, so you're probably not going to hear them. And that's just not the game. You're missing out. In total, there was around 30 minutes of dialogue which varied on which teammates you had in your party and at what point of the campaign you were at, that then determined the possible conversations or newsreels you could hear in the elevators. And that's just Mass Effect 1. All this to say, you could get hold of a physical copy of an old game. You are now the curator of that game and the version of it and the information that's stored in it. Don't let people change your game on you. Reason 3, games can be suppressed. Your least favourite Chris is the culprit of my next point. And how did he manage that? Well, at the start of 2025, we got the critically panned movie, The Electric State, starring Chris Pratt and Millie Bobby Brown. It's an adventure movie set in a cool, modern, retro 90s vibe with sci-fi robots who have gained consciousness after being used as tools and weapons of war, who are then shunned away from human society and left to their own little robot area. The movie itself wasn't bad by the audience's standards, but we are talking about games here, not movies. The entire movie is a reimagination of the art book, The Electric State by Simon Salenhag, a hauntingly beautiful post-Second Civil War 90s America in a world on the brink of an apocalypse. The book follows a girl who is trying to find her brother after they were split in foster care. It tells of her life, her relationships, how the world has become addicted to these neurocasters, and how some dark, twisted force seems to lurk in the pits of the internet. Already, that's a more interesting synopsis than this cartoonish, family-friendly Netflix slop. Anyway, Free League Publishing, they made a TTRPG based on the art book, as they had done from Tales from the Loop and Things from the Flood, set in the same creepy dark world where addiction is perfectly fine so long as it feeds capitalism, PTSD can be cured by virtual reality, and techno-cultists are only a car ride away. But looking at these two things side by side, you'd scarcely believe that this is closer to horror than this Hallmark holiday special. To chase my point here, people who just straight up didn't like the movie will associate it with this TTRPG and might even think this is cutesy. The reviews for this game are fantastic, and it would be a shame that its reputation be overshadowed just by Netflix's advertising budget. By comparison, 4th edition D&D wasn't a flop, but it sure as heck gets treated like it was. People denounce it and give it stick because of its combat and updated rules that they thought of being as similar to MMORPGs at the time. Just play Pathfinder was the common response, but when posting to forums about rules clarifications. It was also it was almost memed to failure, and it's not until recently that it seems people are giving it the recognition it deserves. And I use the word recognition there very deliberately because people still get bent out of shape discussing it. And to clarify, I included here not to praise it, but to say that it really wasn't as bad as what some people would say, and still had some really incredible and inspiring content. For example, my favourite Lich in all of D&D, Osternath, the Bronze Lich, otherwise known as the Heart of the Whispered One. I'm not going to go into her full story, but when I tell you this is a lich who specializes in subterfuge and overthrowing governments while utilizing the literal heart of the God of Secrets, Vecna, to do so, you can't tell me your head isn't already buzzing with ideas how the story could go, how your players could go up against it, what kind of mischief they can all get up to. And you can only find details about her in this supplement. It would just be a shame that stuff like that was suppressed because of an opinion rather than an actual critique. Reason 4. Style. I'm not saying that older games looked better. Clearly they had their low points. Or even that new games look terrible because, fuck me, some of them are gorgeous. But there is something about an old tome that just hits different. A friend of mine sent our group chat a message saying he was cleaning out his old place. They came across him and his brother's old books, and it was a copy of the first Vampire the Masquerade. And if you aren't familiar with it, I'll let the creator describe it, or the art within it himself.
When I first started in role-playing games, the biggest artists in the gaming industry at the time were like guys that did the D&D stuff, but they weren't very dynamic.
Vampire was the first time where I really sunk, I mean, pardon the pun, I sunk my teeth into it. And it was the right subject matter at the right time for me.
I immediately knew what I wanted to do. Instead of having this character on this page that feels like a comic book, what if, I want to make them real, I want to make them possible. I would just get friends over. I would say, okay, who's going to be right for this character? And my friends were in these bands.
It's my pal Sherry Wall. She's one of my favorite people on the planet.
And yeah, there's a classic right there. That's Tim Schinkel.
My best friend Joel, who modeled for everything for me for a long time.
My pal Scotty Wilson.
The absolute quintessential gypsy white trash vampire, Scott Wilson.
When he sent that into our group chat, dude, I was just filled with envy because I wish I had a book that iconic that had so many memories for so many people tied to it. I'm not going to harp on about it here, but I will mention that AI image generation coming into the TTRPG space could never come up with something as iconic or as credible as the books we have. Reason 5, rights. I didn't want to bring up Deadpool here as an example, but it is unfortunately the perfect example of this kind of stuff happening. At one point a few years ago when Deadpool was at peak popularity, the Deadpool game from 2015, it shot up to more than £200 for a PS4 copy because it had been pulled from all shelves in all stores. Then it got relisted due to the movies and the price tanked. But then it shot up again. And that's because not only was the game removed from digital stores, but it was removed because of a license expiration. Just another unfathomable BS reason for people to lose access to media or games. This is now compounded, making a manufactured scarcity the likes of which we see on Vinted, eBay, or Depop when it comes to classic or vintage items. Kind of like a terrible scalping idea, buy up all the copies in the hopes that people will pay exorbitant prices for this stuff based on just fandom alone. Another example of this rights BS is The Feeding by American Head Charge. You won't find this album on Spotify or YouTube Music or iTunes. That's because the band, American Head Charge, they do not own the rights to the album. Their record label, DRT Entertainment, pulled a fast one on them and kind of got the raw deal of it. You can watch the album on YouTube as it has been uploaded by fans over the years, but the quality is compressed and you are at the mercy of YouTube's encoding for decent sound. And that's why I own this physical disc copy. Does mean I need to play it in my car as I don't own an actual CD player anymore. But when the opening audio barrage that is Loyalty, track 1, when that hits, I'm just transported to my teenage years and it hits hard. In conclusion, truth be told, I don't know how to finish this video other than telling you that we are losing quality media at a pace that we haven't really copped onto yet. The suppression of good games and books is already happening by the tsunami of slop that's flooding our creative spaces. Drive-thru-RPG, Humble Bundle, Kickstarter, crowdfunding pledges, backer kits, YouTube reviews, and social media posts, they're all being bombarded with AI-generated shite that is just trying to get your money and pushing the older, handcrafted, meticulously scrutinized, and play-tested games to the back of the shelf. There is one thing I want to leave you on. If you're a diehard PDF or digital download player, I'm not attacking you here saying that you're bad. Quite the opposite. I want more people playing these games, and if that's the most accessible way to do it, then hell yeah, fucking keep it up. But I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce you to the Bits and Mortar program. The Bits and Mortar program has been around for years, and it is an added value program for retailers. What that is retailers can sign up for free, and when they are approved, they will gain access to digital copies of their associated publishers' content. So when you buy a physical book from a brick and mortar shop, you get the digital copy of it for free.
I'll make that deal. How about you, Udovich? You make that deal?
I'd make that deal.
I don't blame you. Damn good deal.
I know this isn't necessarily for old games only, since it's mostly new books that will benefit from this program, but it is a form of media preservation in itself. And that's it. That's the video. Something absolutely disgusting that I found while making this video was this image of Marion Stokes. You know, Marion Stokes that I mentioned earlier in the video. This is an AI generated image of the shot I used earlier in the video. To clarify, when you Google Marion Stokes, this image appears first. Someone clearly made this because they weren't happy with how Marion looked. So they made her younger, adjusted her teeth, softened her skin, made her nose smaller. You know, just rewriting history by changing how she looked. You absolute slop-churning, griff-field, waste of grey matter f***ing c***s. Thanks for watching, be well, be kind, goodbye.